It's Deconversion Therapy. Welcome, all the people out there. You Christians, you non-Christians, you Hindus, Jewish people, Mormons, ex-everything, pagans, witches, and ambidextrous. Welcome to Deconversion Therapy. I'm Karen.
This is Bonnie, and you don't have to be any of those things.
You have to. You have to be the ones anything that I listed. And
specifically.
Just those. Obviously, I did not say Catholic.
That's right.
So I'm here in Tennessee, and Bonnie is down in Florida where DeSantis is. And I just heard the funniest thing. I guess I missed this saying, but DeSantis was just in Iowa, and Iowans harassed him and chanted until he stopped talking on a campaign trail. They chanted pudding fingers. And I'm like, pudding fingers?
You haven't heard about that?
No.
He eats his pudding with his fingers.
Oh my God, that's disgusting. I thought it meant his fingers looked weird. Oh man, nasty.
I can't remember where I heard it. Don't you hear so much on TikTok anymore that you're like, oh, hell if I know the source. At least it used to be, I heard on Dave Letterman or this podcast, but
right.
And P.S., I have a lot shorter attention span than I want to have.
Totally.
With my media.
Same
because
here.
of TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right. Totally. In fact, if there's a TikTok and someone starts it out slow, I'm like, sorry. That might be a great story, might change my life, but no, we're not going to. And there's an editing button, and you can learn to use it.
Oh, and these fuck faces who are like, listen to the end. No.
I know.
When you tell me to listen to the end, it just makes me not want to even more. It might be so satisfying, but I just kind of don't want to be bossed around.
You're not the boss of me, TikTok. All right. Well, we have a lot of new listeners, and we would like to thank our Venmo love offering person, Jennifer, who has put in money and sponsored this episode. She will regret it, but we really appreciate it. And I wanted to say to the new people, Bonnie and I grew up together in South Florida. We met when we were 1 because her grandparents lived on the same street that my parents moved from. She came from California. I came from New York. And then, we were just going to school together, going to church.
Oh, yeah. My mom was like, where should I send my young child to school? Because she has too much energy, and I must get her started in school because she's killing us. And so the Baptist school would take us early because my birthday fell...
You pay them.
Late. Yeah, you pay them. So you want to come early? Yeah. I totally remember my interview with our principal, too. Going to some apartment where I don't think she lived.
What?
Yeah.
You had to go to an apartment?
Yeah.
It sounds sketchy.
Yeah, it was this really cute area on Palm Beach, but I don't know. Did she ever live over there? Who knows? Anyhow.
I think this was a trafficking scheme because I have never heard tell.
When I was little, they realized they needed to get me occupied because instead of taking naps, I went and memorized the alphabet backwards. And I was like,
let
me hear me say the alphabet backwards. And as of course, the whole family's like, you can't do that. Okay, go ahead. And then when I spit it out, they were all like, oh, okay, you're not taking naps, are you? Little shit.
And they also, when they went to our Baptist church, realized she was a witch because we learned only witches could say it backwards and write it backwards. That's so. I think my parents sent me because of the opposite. I was still sucking my thumb. And they were like, Karen is on the Benadryl again. I was just monotone. So I think they're like, let's get her blood flowing. Let's try something. But so we've known each other for a long time, and Bonnie ended up going to a secular college halfway through, leaving our Christian college. Let's just say the ratio of sinners is the same, but she ended up being sort of distant so you could question the faith that we were in, and it took me longer. I became a missionary and so forth. But we are both out of evangelicalism and out of the faith of Christianity, but we are all for whatever you are as long as you don't put it into public policy and the government and try and be mean to people. There. Is that good? Isn't that nice?
That's so weird that it is. And it's weird that you said that because she doesn't know what's on my little thing of notes about the episode we're going to talk about today. But that's why what we're going to talk about is lighter and fluffier than maybe some would want it to be, but too stinking bad. And I said stinking to clean it up. So, yeah, it'll come around. It's as though you planted it, though, with what you just said.
I planned it at all because I'm a witch because I could write backwards in elementary. Find us on all the social media that we have, Instagram, Facebook, and we're on Threads and also TikTok, but just find us there. I don't know what's going on with Threads, but it's not as exciting as it once was. Anywho, find us there, and we also in our show notes. I really sold it. In our show notes, we have the links to all our social media. If you want to support an episode, if you want to become a sponsor, we do Zoom meetings where Bonnie actually shows her face and things like that. So it's all down there.
Let me do just a tiny bit of personal chat for 1 second. Do you have anything good for me to watch on TV? Because I just finished Last Tango in Halifax, and I was just watching it because I thought, oh, it's a British background, and that'll be fun to watch the rolling hills of England. And I didn't like any character in this show. I watched all 4 seasons of it. They never got to where I liked them, but I stuck it out. And then started watching that thing about Last Call, the one where there was a serial killer on the loose in New York City and the gay clubs. And it was so dark that the minute I started playing it before bed, I was like, oh no, this won't end well in my dream world.
Exactly.
So what do I watch?
I didn't watch that one because I know the story, and I was just like, I love my murder sometimes, but some of them are just too much for me. So I think some things you can watch could be light fluffiness. I just watched Felicity. I don't know why. I'd never seen it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why. I think I want something light that I can look away and I not miss anything. And it's continuous for a lot of seasons. So I'm like going back and looking for things I haven't seen. But other than that, I can't think of anything.
Can I tell my little Felicity story? And if you want to cut it, that's fine. So I worked at a talent agency in the writing division of TV. And we signed this young writer who was presenting herself as about 18, and she would sit on my boss's sofa and let her legs, gross, and let her legs dangle off like she was Edith Ann on a giant sofa.
Right.
And I was in charge of getting her paperwork together to process for paying her checks. And there was some weirdness about, like, why wouldn't she give me a copy of her driver's license for me to give to our business department? And I said, you guys, there's just something weird going on. So I leave my job there. I go to some kind of development job, and I get a phone call from the 2 guys who had signed her. And they're like, you totally called it. You're totally right. She was 30 and telling everybody she was 18. I'm like,
what?
Yeah, I know. And you can still find it somewhere, like if you Google it. But she, because youth is king in Los Angeles, writing in Hollywood, whatever you want to call it, in the TV writing industry. They want young people, which always baffles me because they have no life to write about. You know, with as much as she was writing, she's 30. Anyway.
Did you ask her skincare regimen?
That was a fun scandal.
She
was just short.
How did it relate to Felicity?
Oh, she wrote on Felicity. They got her a job on Felicity. Sorry. Yeah. There you
go. Oh, gosh.
So then I think they fired her from Felicity. Yeah. But, to get on the writing staff of Felicity was a pretty big deal because I think it was the first season, maybe even when she had long hair.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. You have to be on the long hair one. Anyone can write for season 2. I know.
Once you cut your hair.
They don't like you. They just like young, long-haired women. Everyone else. I can't really think of anything else but that. But I've been busy with family and lots going on with family. You're not going to watch my family?
Oh, good for you. You know what?
And that's about it.
I'll just watch 30 Rock over and over again. It's just a happy place to be.
That sounds healthy.
You know?
Exactly. That's what I'm looking for. So now I look for how it is filmed. If there's not enough light in the shot, I don't want to watch it. So I'm sorry, Norway. I'm not watching anything from your country unless you turn the lights on because it's too dark.
Sorry, Ozark.
Yeah. That's right.
Sorry, Jason Bateman. I love you, but Ozark is blue.
It is blue.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and remember how MASH was like green? It was just dark drab green and maybe brown. I think there was
just right. Everything was brown then, though. There was that one that was. I didn't watch a lot of those things like you did. So I didn't live in a heathen household. But I remember the one that was at a, there was something that was like police people, and it was just a bunch of older men.
It was Barney Miller.
Barney fucking Miller. Everything was,
Miller.
Mustard yellow and brown. Oh, man. Anyway, that brings us into the era that we're going to talk about today.
Oh, but these kids did not wear mustard brown. In fact, they had all the different colors. But purple was a big one. All right, so we're going to talk about the Osmonds because they are a big family and they are famously Mormon. So that's a big part of who they are.
Let's go back and really explain who they are to people who are young.
Okay, there's going to be a little bit of track laying here where I explain to you what the world was like back in the 60s. Television on your television in your living room was a small box and it was black and white. And there were 3 networks and that was it. And they went off the air maybe at like 12:30 at night. And that was it. If you didn't want to watch, or if you wanted to watch TV after 12:30 at night, you were fucked. So I guess people read books. I don't know. A telephone was attached to a line.
Well, I guess, I bet people slept. I bet people slept. Like, our sleeping is so fucked up these days. And we're all like, I wonder why I can't sleep.
That's right.
Because all of us have been programmed to have media at any time.
Anytime. Okay, so that was the world. So, and there's a great line in Seinfeld where the development executive says to George Costanza when they're pitching at the network, why am I going to watch this? And he goes, because it's on TV. Like, that is not how it works anymore. Just because it's on TV doesn't mean you're going to watch it. So
but it did
show
then.
that was just on TV. Yeah, it did then. So one show that was on TV was the Andy Williams Show. And he was like a super dorky crooner who sang Moon River. And he would have acts on. His brother saw this little barbershop quartet of 4 little tiny boys who had been performing for some Walt Disney show, and said to Andy, you got to book them on the show. And Andy was like, oh, I don't know about kids. It was his father. And he's like, well, but my father, whatever he said, I did. So booked these 4 kids on the show as a barbershop quartet. So, like, that's so wholesome and cheesy. And today, can you imagine, like, one of 3 choices, crime,
nope,
something else, and a barbershop quartet. Well, I guess let's watch the barbershop quartet because the whole family can watch. Anyway, so what you were watching, if you saw this barbershop quartet, were 4 little Mormon kids, and it was Alan and Wayne and Merrill and Jay. So this was in the early to mid 60s. So they were singing along.
We were not alive, people.
We were not alive. This is all from research. And I don't say that to lie. Okay, so Alan, Wayne, Merrill, and Jay, and I'm reading them in chronological order, too. I'll tell you a little more about the family order in a second. So then, when Donnie hits 5 years old, he had been practicing at home. When he hits 5, he joins the brothers. So they're no longer a barbershop quartet, and they have to go by the Osmonds. And I think, no, I didn't read this, but my spidey sense tells me they went by the Osmonds because there was a girl who had been born, and she was just getting older at home, and they're like, well, we can't call it the Osmond brothers because we're going to stick her in there somewhere eventually down the line. So, so
and it was about the same time as the Jacksons.
Yes. So that's coming. Hold on. I got to give you a tiny bit more pipe to lay. So their dad. Okay, so the parents are named Verl and Olive Osmond. They live in Utah, of course.
Of course.
They're Mormons. Ogden, Utah. Okay, so they had one kid, and that kid was hard of hearing, one son. They named him Verl. Then they had Tom, and he was deaf. So they had one, I think, that had a lot of hard of hearing issues, and one that was totally deaf. So Verl, I didn't get a date on when Verl was born, but my guess is it was 45 because of what I'm going to tell you next. Tom was born in 47. So then in 49 comes Alan. In 51 comes Wayne. In 53 comes Merrill. 55 comes Jay. Donnie in 1957. Marie, 1959. Then I think maybe they thought everything was over, but then Jimmy popped out in 63. So that was Jimmy Osmond. So like everybody was exactly 2 years apart until the last one, which makes you think, they were just letting God. So
yeah, exactly.
So they've got these 2 older brothers at home, and they know that they're going to have to possibly fund future mission trips as Mormons. That's part of what they do when they come of age. Yep. So they originally the dad started them performing so that they could buy hearing aids for Verl and Tom, which I think is so dear.
That's so
I think that's sweet. Yeah,
well,
and to
now
fund their
I feel
missions.
Terrible already.
No, you don't.
And to fund and to progress. Joseph Smith's digging up, stuff.
Well, the other thing that I do want to say in my shitty, judgmental way, I commend their parents for not naming them all with like V letter names. Or all A's, It's Alan and Alex
J's.
and Annie and Armand. Or all J's, what have you. You got
Jennifer,
just a variety.
Jessica, whatever the Duggars were. Yeah.
Jadrian. Yeah. So, So they're all like 2 years apart precisely. Anyway, so that's how. So Donnie starts up at age 5. So then they get out of the whole barbershop thing, and they're 5 little kids who are really, really good at music. They know instruments. Yep. They can sing. They can harmonize. If they give them any kind of assignment to do, they go home and practice it, and they come back to Andy Williams, and it's perfect. But they were really hard on themselves because their dad was really hard on them, or strict with them too. Right. The dad was the driving force. He woke them every morning by a bugle. A bugle.
No. Oh my God.
I know. It's so funny. So
Bonnie, if you had seen Shiny Happy People that we covered, they talk about how the Duggars were just like this. Very good, did instruments, learned everything. And it was really because of a lot of abuse. Like, they were scared not to. That was the only way to control the kid, is to squish their own inner, like, desires.
They did squish their own inner desires, too, because, first of all, everybody who deals with anything religious probably knows, Mormons, no drinking, no smoking, no sex before marriage. And Donnie even said in one interview that they weren't allowed to have fights or to disagree or to even express themselves. So they just towed the line. So that is how, but it looked like, I mean, you can only imagine. I mean, if you're going to be a robot and be allowed to wear those funky 70s clothes instead of long dresses and everything, you probably had some fun. There was probably a little bit of fun there, especially with all boys. Yeah.
And that's all, if that's all you know, then you're bad and you're good. It's just a different sliding scale anyway. And I'm sure they had fun.
Yep. So it is kind of sad that Donnie says that when he joined them, by the way, he was 5.
I know.
They kind of made
looking back on my career.
Right. When he joined them, they kind of made him feel like he was the interloper. And they were like, well, we've been doing this for a long time. And he's like, but I've been working hard too at home. And part of that, I think, was probably because he was super cute. He was super cute. A little bit more palatable maybe than the other ones were. I don't think it was his age. There was just something. But it was the same thing with Michael Jackson.
Right.
He just stood out.
They were both visually more acceptable, attractive as kids and as they, grew up. I mean, Michael Jackson. Anyway, but he was adorable.
Yeah. Okay. So they're going along when he's between like 5 and 10, recording different songs and pop albums. So it's weird because they have this parallel thing where the brothers were doing stuff that was kind of pop, and then they poked Donnie out there to record on his own, to sing like bubblegum songs to like little prepubescent girls. And so Donnie recorded under just Donnie's name, the song Sweet and Innocent, and it's catchy and jingly, and I love it. I'm not going to lie. Go Away, Little Girl, that's catchy and jingly, and I love it. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. And Puppy Love, and that's catchy and jingly, and I'm not going to lie.
I'm not going to lie. How old was he then? I also love it. I'm still picturing 5, and that's creepy.
It's as he's getting older to be like 9-ish, 10-ish, 12-ish.
Oh, I would
when
think
he's
he
little
was 16
and his voice hasn't changed
or something. Oh,
well, hold on. Yeah. Okay. So he's singing the bubblegum songs, and I can't remember what song it was that he sang. At 15 is when he really shot to huge fame, because he made an appearance on Lucille Ball's show called Here's Lucy, which again, it wasn't I Love Lucy, but if it was on TV, you had to watch it. And so he serenaded Eve Plum from the Brady Bunch, who was playing, I guess, her niece or something like that.
Jan.
Jan. So that's when he was 15 that he shoots to big fame. And I don't know if they still have these, but a big way of disseminating information back then to the teeny bopper crowd was through magazines called 16 Magazine and Teen Beat and Tiger Beat and all sorts of other things. Yep. But Teen Beat was all, and Tiger Beat was all pinups and fluffy pieces about the Jacksons, Donny Osmond, the Partridge Family, and all of these people who were any potential for teen idleness you had went into these magazines. And Karen, you, like, when we came of the age of who are you going to put on your wall, Karen was Andy Gibb. Our ding-dong friend Karen T liked Donny Osmond a lot. I remember, I'm pretty sure she had that lunchbox, but no, she had a strawberry shortcake one. Anyway, and then there was Embarrassing Me, who had Scott Baio.
She can pick 'em.
I can pick 'em.
I remember I did a walkathon just because they said Leif Garrett was going to sing at the end. So I did like a walkathon, and somehow, like, they're turned on a radio. Like, Leif wasn't even there, but later I learned Leif Garrett was the one who started Jason Bateman on drugs. So there you go. But they're still good friends, and I don't think there's any drugs now. So
yeah. Jason just has moved all of his issues to his food consumption.
To his eating disorder, right.
So what's confusing about this is the same thing that to me was confusing about Wham. Like when Wham also had a song that was released that was like Wham featuring George Michael. I'm like, why the hell is there Wham and Wham featuring George Michael out at the same time in my world? So same thing was happening with the Osmonds. There were the Osmonds, and then there was Donnie singing his heart out to the little girls. And the weird extra thing about it was he was performing with the Osmonds sometimes, and then they'd shoot him out to sing his little bubblegum songs. And even on the records and in the performances, the brothers were his backup singers. So they were just really, really insulated. And then he was
probably like, you didn't let me in. I will show you now. Yeah.
That's what I kind of want to think.
Of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then to just throw another weird wrench in there, they decide to put Marie out to work at age 13. Think of where we were when we were 13. That's 8th grade.
No one is wanting to see that.
No one wants to see that. So at 13, they have her sing a country song called Paper Roses, and it goes to number 1. And so it's not an awful song. She has an insanely smooth.
That's crazy.
I know. And she just had a nice mature look about her at the from the beginning. She always
was marriageable.
Looked older.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm joking.
So you've got on one track the Osmonds, and then there's Donnie, and then there's Marie. So all of the brothers, the older ones, those 4, the ones that made up the barbershop quartet.
Meryl,
Allen, Jay, and Wayne. I fucking can't believe after all these years, I know which Osmond is which, and I know all their names. It's so embarrassing. So the other brothers wanted to venture off into like real rock. And they were more influenced by Led Zeppelin and stuff. And the dad didn't like it, but he said okay. So the first song that they wrote that was actually like hard rock is really good. And you'll always see it pop up on TikTok or all that kind of stuff. Like the Osmonds really had a banger here with this song called Crazy Horses. And it had this weird, like, Yamaha electric sound that was kind of like a horse neighing. And then one brother started singing really low, and the guitar riff was really good. And then Merrill came in with his higher voice, and it's a really good song. And every time I hear it, I'm like, I can't believe this is the Osmonds. It was just so out of type. That's
wild.
It was really a good song.
Because they were totally marketed as the shiny, clean, wholesome. Like, they actually looked scrubbed clean before you ever saw them.
They had big smiles, big teeth.
Big white teeth.
Yep. I mean, their hair was kind of long, but everybody's hair was longish back then. It wasn't like Robert Plant, I'm going to have sex with your daughter.
It was not in... No, it was not in disarray. It was molded.
No. So, and I feel so bad that they were there at the time where everybody wore matching white jumpsuits, and then somebody would have a tie on that's yellow, someone was orange, somebody was blue, Donnie was always purple, and then Donnie became identified with purple, this or that. So,
yeah.
So Crazy Horses is kind of accepted on, like, yeah, maybe they're turning a corner and they're going to be real rock stars.
Good.
Yeah. So then, so then, you know what they decide to do next? What album they decide to put out next? No, you don't. Because no one does.
I don't.
It was a concept album called The Plan. You know what it was about? Kind of like about Mormonism.
Oh.
Yeah.
Joseph, you are the one with the golden tablets.
That's the thing. It wasn't that on the nose. It wasn't that direct.
Right.
So the guys were of age to go on church missions. So let's see. If Donnie was like 15, you've got 17, 19, 21, and 23 for those guys. They're full on mission ready. But they believed that they could reach more people through their music. And in fact, it really probably would have been awkward for them to go on mission tours as somebody who's that famous, Yeah. I don't
Especially if they knock on doors and don't sing. That would be like a ripoff. Right.
So they put out The Plan. One reviewer said that The Plan carried a too strong religious message, given that Mormonism is fairly conservative and not usually associated with the themes of rock and roll. No kidding. That reviewer also said that the music was too varied and too experimental, which I think they even said that when Sgt. Pepper's came out. So that sounds right. That sounds like what people were reviewing back then. They had 2 minor hits. Maybe number 36, but in the UK they went, I think, to number 5, and then there was a hit
with the Mormon.
With the Mormon album, which it wasn't hit you over the head with a cross,
right?
Mormon. So, all right. So I'm going to kind of pick up now on a documentary that was happening right when they released this record. At this point. This is 1973. So many years ago. 1973.
So imagine Breck shampoo, Tame shampoo, just
no
trying
shampoo.
To get you into the socks that have the little fuzzy balls on the back.
Pom-pom socks? Those are actually for a reason, so they don't go into your shoe when you're playing tennis. Anyway,
I'm giving the era.
Yeah, I know. So somebody did a documentary on them, and it's not like documentaries today where you're watching somebody and they put the name underneath and they help you out as you're watching. You go, I wonder which Osmond that is. Nope, they're like, fuck it, we're just going to show these Osmonds talking. So when I say that I think it's so and so speaking, that's why.
Gotcha.
Mom was on the tour with them. They go over to the UK. The whole plane is an Osmond plane. And they go to England together. And they show the plane. And I'm like, oh, look who's there. Mom goes on tour with them. Okay. And I'm guessing dad too, but they filmed mom. Not sure. So they interview the mom, and she said, the kids feel that this leadership position they have, they don't want to let the kids down. In that respect, I feel they're very good missionaries for Christianity. I get that.
Gotcha.
I get that.
I mean, all the Christians are saying, no, you're a Mormon. But
right.
I get it.
Yep.
And they're making a bigger impact than knocking door to door.
And they're non-threatening. Like, if I were a young kid seeing Robert Plant back then versus Donny Osmond, I'd be like, oh, Robert Plant's going to try to, you know, bang people, and I might be there, and it would be scary. So Donny was very non-threatening. Yeah. And so was Alan and Wayne and Jay and Merle and
Merle
Jimmy.
and Squirrel and Chippy.
So at some point during this documentary, by the way, when they get to the UK, 10,000 fans were at the airport to meet them. And I want to know, like, how do you get that information out to all the people in London? Like, is it on, I guess people are just listening to the radio. Like, the Osmonds are coming to the airport? Fuck it, man.
Totally.
We're going to the airport. We're going to see the Osmonds.
People used to talk to each other. And they used to like call on the phone. On the phone. So I bet, like you and I, Leif Garrett's going to be down at the walkathon. So I'm going to go down there with my breathing, and he's going to look at me.
He's going to be so excited. So excited. So it seems like it's just chaos. 10,000 people. That's a lot of people. Anyway,
it is.
So they're met with these huge crowds. They've got giant concerts all over the place. They show them completely soaked in sweat, getting in the back of a car, having to like suck down orange juice to, you know, replenish their systems and try to wipe off stuff before they get back in the plane or the bus. I don't know. So at one point there, the mom says, too, that a lot of people have brought their entire families to convert since they've been in show business. And I can kind of see that, you know?
Wait, what do you mean? Brought their whole entire families to convert? What does that mean?
To Mormonism. So since the kids have been
come
performing,
to the concerts?
No, this is just an interview, in the documentary. So when the mom is interviewed in the documentary, she's plugging the idea that they are good missionaries for Mormonism because people who have seen them perform have been made aware of the church and have come to the church and then been converted and joined the church. So
it's very Hillsong, and that look at this attractive pseudo-celebrity stuff. I want to go see that person, you know, and then there you are. Interesting.
And there were so few ways to be closer to who you loved back then, so I guess to be closer to the same God was probably pretty exciting, especially if, think about like, okay, you're the parent of a teenager back then, and you desperately don't want Robert Plant to fuck them at a concert, and they're like, I'd like to go to church. Thank God. Let's go.
Right. So, I don't care
like,
what it's like. Well, it's a temple, and you can't say what goes on in there. And
So,
and let's be clear, they are not the Mormons that believed in plural marriage, just multiple children. This was not the Warren Jeffs group. Right.
No. Anyway, so their mom, Olive, says that this thrills them because they believe Jesus is the Son of God and that he's going to be coming back soon. Okay. So then I'm pretty sure it's Wayne who they're interviewing next.
It's always Wayne.
He starts talking about their newest album, The Plan. And he says it's a concept album about their Mormon beliefs. And he says, there's a lot of confusion these days among especially the youth. They're asking themselves questions like, why am I here? What's going to happen when I die someday? The Plan album was our attempt to answer those questions because we feel we do have the answer. So They answered it in the vaguest way possible.
Right.
So here's what a reviewer said of the plan, and I like this. Artists aren't often monetarily rewarded for taking risks, and in the case of the Osmonds, their offering to the world at the time definitely didn't pay off monetarily. But in hindsight, this guy says he thinks they deserve respect for putting their entire livelihood on the line. It was one of the biggest gambles in rock history, and it flopped. And yeah,
right.
They put it on the line,
right.
and it did not hit.
And the people said no.
The people said, no, thank you. This guy goes on to say, Mormonism has always struggled with public perception, and rock music at the time carried negative connotations in religious households. And as Mormons have maintained a reputation as being very conservative, the music may have been too heavy for those who were more religious, yet too cheesy for your average rock and roller. I'm like, that says
right.
it perfectly. What was the deal with this? Yeah. So... you can go online if you choose to hear analyses of the various songs on there, but I will just give you a bit of the highlights. So the psychedelic opener is called War in Heaven. Okay.
Well, that's pretty, that's overt. Okay.
Then there's one called Before the Beginning, a forlorn, ponderous ballad with sweeping orchestral lines introducing the Mormon concept of eternal progression. Because part of the Latter-day Saint theology is the idea that God's children are going to one day progress to a godlike state. Then there's another song called Movie Man. They say this Lucifer-like character appears in it.
I knew there was once they said movie, I knew it was going to be like the devil comes in.
Secular. Right. Let Me In was not a sex ballad, but
it was not.
It was a ballad that one might expect from the Osmonds, it says, but the lyrics carry a more religious subtext upon analysis. The spirited One-Way Ticket to Anywhere is one of the stronger songs on the album, featuring a big chorus, lush harmonies, intense cowbell action. Here's one that I don't even...
Did they have the Mormon Tabernacle Choir backing them up for anything?
No,
you would think that's a natural.
No.
Okay.
Because they were rockers, or that's what they wanted to do. Let's see. I like this. Are You Out There is the Gethsemane of this album. As the protagonist of the play, born into confusing circumstances, struggles to make sense of his life and pleads sincerely with his creator. Then there's one called It's All Right, Darlin'. A song that the already married Merrill wrote for his wife, Mary. It sounds a little out of place, they said, but it's contextualized when one is made aware of the importance that Mormons place on heterosexual marriage. They placed a big importance on marriage.
And what do they call it?
Marriage.
Not eternal, not ethereal. The marriage goes on in heaven.
They believe that when you marry, when you marry your spouse, it is their belief that you are with them for eternity. And so that is why divorce is not an option. There was an interesting little bit of it here. Okay, so speaking of marriage, Merrill was already married in 1973 when they went on this tour to the UK. And so was Alan, and so was Wayne. They all got married in 1973. It was a good year for Mormon girls who were looking to get an Osmond.
Yeah.
Donnie ended up waiting 5 years. In 1978, he got married. He was 20. 20, Karen.
Exactly. Because this is a young situation with the Mormons, and it's called celestial marriage, just to save anyone from writing in.
So of all those Osmonds, they all got married 73, 73, 73, 78. Then Jay was like the outlier. He waited till 87.
Ooh, hold out. Crazy.
Yeah, that's a long time compared to your brothers.
And
if you think
Mormon
about it.
years,
and
for
in
sure.
And in Mormon years. And Jay's also the only one of them who ever got divorced.
Yeah.
So Jay was...
Although I think there's someone else who got divorced.
Well, she's coming up. Yep.
All right. Okay.
So let's see. That was the UK years. And then, okay, so they do the tour. They put out this Plan album. So they do the UK tour. It's 73. At some point during the next year, Donnie and Marie together started singing, and together they co-hosted 1 week of the Mike Douglas Show, which was an afternoon entertainment show, which we really don't have anymore. So
we don't.
Yeah, so that was on at like 4 o'clock every afternoon. And when Mike would go on vacation, he would have a co-host or, guest hosts come in. So they did such a good job as brother and sister hosting that. Fred Silverman offered them a show of their own. So if we go back to the lesson at the beginning of the podcast about how few things were on TV and how big the audiences were, if you get given your own TV show, you don't say no. And he didn't offer it to all the Osmonds. It was to Donnie and Marie specifically.
That's uncomfortable, maybe.
That's a great word
Going
for
home
it.
to
That's
say,
a shitty word. Like, yeah. Yeah. And
because
so,
I'll address the elephant in the room.
Okay.
When the Osmonds were around, one glowed, and it was Donnie. You look at them and you're like, they're fun. And then you see Donnie, and he's like, his teeth, he had this smile that was like, had an extra something to it.
Yeah.
And then, but there was always then Jimmy. And so Jimmy was just exactly as you would picture. All of them, and then they'd sort of make fun. They'd go, and let's not forget Jimmy. And here would come this kid that is every kid in your neighborhood that you would say, oh, here comes Jimmy.
Yeah.
I mean, he was exactly like that.
And he didn't have the black puffy hair that they all had. He had like light brown, straight, kind of
feathery
greasy,
hair.
feathered hair. And he was at a point in his development where he was chubbier. And God, and they just brutal. It's brutal how they had some kind of hit over there with him singing a song in his baby voice called the long-haired lover from Liverpool. Sorry. Let me say that over again.
It's a new hepatitis.
That's great. Who cares? So, like, anytime anyone says lover, it creeps me out. But especially when it's like little Mormon boy saying, I'll be your long-haired lover. Yeah. Anyway, no, you won't. So it is a bummer, and it is uncomfortable. And when in future interviews, they do talk about how that show screwed them up because it wasn't just a show where they could do a little bit of music and then get off and somebody else took it. But like Donnie and Marie had to do stupid sketches and be corny together and sing numbers that were big and produced and the popular songs of the day, but they did them in a very Lawrence Welk. Nobody's going to know that reference either. They did them in a very Mormon-friendly, family-friendly way.
Right. It's the kind where you sit on like a bench they pull out there and you sway while sitting. There aren't many songs that you sing while seated and swaying. But I also was just thinking about, pulling off the whole show. Those variety shows for people who never saw them, Sonny and Cher and all that, they were super popular, the Mandrell sisters. But so many costumes. It was like Skit-orama, where it's like you're all dressed up like clowns. saying something stupid. Now you're all going to dress up like cowboys and say something
You're going to
stupid.
dress up
it was just
like you're in the 50s and do songs from Grease, or you're going to do like a roller skating number. And then there was one where they had Donnie and Marie and Sonny and Cher came to visit the show, and then they sang some they sang Silly Love Songs by Paul McCartney together.
Right.
Yeah, it's very cringy. And it's, to her credit, it's good that Cher went on to have the career that she did after that variety show. Because what happened to the Osmond brothers, and they talk in some of the subsequent documentaries, they talk about resenting it. They were still working on the show. They were choreographers. They were backup singers. They were backup dancers, like producers. Yeah. And one of them said,
I'm glad those sound better. I was just picturing them all like just holding the mic, the boom mic.
Right.
Jimmy, 2 feet to the left.
So, to be like relegated to that just makes me sad for them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in your brain, I was thinking the same thing. I was wondering if Donnie had any secret thoughts of like, you didn't want me joining when I was little, and this is what happens. There's the ebb and flow.
Yeah.
I wonder. I don't know. He probably thought it, but then
I just
felt
think
bad for thinking
he
it.
did come out like outwardly more attractive, and he had charisma, and that was it.
Yeah. I remember when people were like, oh, but I like Wayne. I like Jay. And like, well, that was like me when I would like the weird guy in an ensemble comedy show.
Right.
I
like the loser one.
Yeah.
I like the one who's going to get arrested. Yeah.
That's me. Give me Danny Bonaducci any day. So they're doing the Donnie and Marie show, and one of the brothers in the subsequent documentary says, like, when we dressed up as lobsters, I knew we were never coming back from this. Like, yeah. Okay, so Donnie and Marie, it's on like 4 years. It's a big hit, of course, because it's on TV, and that's kind of what you need. And they're still able to get the audience of the girls who had come up with him, who were like growing up and maturing with Donnie, and then they started to wane. So, but at the height of their career, Donnie's 20, Marie is 18. They get interviewed on a summer special with Barbara Walters, and she's not one to not ask hard questions. So, let's see. They address Mormonism. Donnie said, when she said, will you marry a Mormon? He said, yeah, I'm going to marry a Mormon. When she asked Marie the same thing. And by the way, I'll send you the picture. Marie's sitting there in a little white shirt with a shawl on. I thought you'd appreciate that you enjoyed a shawl. Marie was not that committal. She was not that committed. She even said that she dated other people. And let me just tell you this and break your heart about Marie. Before marrying, I think this is from Wikipedia, she was engaged in May 1979 to Jeff Creighton, an acting student. But in July of that year, they broke their engagement. During an episode of Watch What Happens Live in January 2019, she told host Andy Cohen that she briefly dated Eric Estrada. She also dated the singer Andy Gibb around the same time.
Oh, that slut.
I find it hard to believe she could pass up Andy Gibb's efforts to ruin her. But who knows?
Who knows?
I don't know. Okay, so Donnie was 20 in this interview, and he talks about marriage to Barbara. And he must have been dating her, but he ended up getting married that same year. And if it was summer...
Not to Barbara, but
not to
someone.
Barbara, but to his wife, who was 19 at the time. She was a student. It's funny, too, in the intro, Barbara calls her the most eligible bachelor. And I'm thinking, maybe you mean most sought-after bachelor, but most eligible, no, because there's a very small pool of people to whom he would be eligible.
And let me just add in there that in that day, even the name Mormon, if you went to regular mainstream churches, was semi-creepy, was semi-unknowable and mysterious, and you knew that they didn't believe like you, and not a lot was known about them because there was no internet, there was no, anything. So they were like the only Mormons anyone had ever seen in their
other than
lives,
the ones on your
unless
block.
they went to Utah.
Yeah, or the ones who were on your block, dressed in the white and the black tie, white shirt, black tie, knocking on your door,
came after
scaring
me.
your kids. Yes. Yeah.
But what if that was two Osmonds? I would have reacted way differently.
Well,
hey, can we sing a duet with you?
No.
That's what it would be.
No, we can't. So then Barbara goes on to ask them if their spouses will be the first person they have sexual relations with. And Donnie said something like, Marie, why don't you take this? And she says, well, we believe in the commandment that says, thou shalt not commit adultery or fornication, and that God is the same now and then and forever and whatever. So then that still applies. And I'm like, first of all, I looked up the commandments just to make sure. It only says adultery. It doesn't say fornication.
It does.
Where'd they add that in? Where'd they add that in? Yeah.
When Paul came around with all his issues.
Paul.
But I don't like that Barbara asked that kind of shit, though.
To an 18-year-old.
She would always do that.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then.
I mean, I respected her, but
so Donnie,
there's some things yeah.
Yeah, well, I still don't like her, really, if we're honest. But so Donnie throws Marie in front to answer, and then it sets up Barbara to say, so is sex going to be the first time you have it with your wife? And Donnie goes, you better believe it. So, okay. Yeah. That's when he talks about spouses going into eternity together, and he really likes the relationships that his brothers have with their wives. And she says, but Donnie, what if it doesn't work out? And he's like, I don't approach it like that. I just have faith that it will. And you know what? They're still married. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Barbara is deceased, but that's not.
Yeah, well, what was she, 90? And then she asks Marie whether premarital sex is a sin. And Marie has to say, an answer, which I think is hard for an 18-year-old. And who knows how much media training. I don't know how much media training they got back then. Today, you'd be completely prepped for these questions. Who knows? But she does very well spokenly say, and this is like a quote, people can live how they want to live. That's not the way we believe. And I'm like, okay, that's great. She didn't shove it down anyone's throat. It wasn't, they really need to repent. They need to do this and that. So also at the time, there was an issue in the church where they had been, I guess, publicized for not ever having a black priest or whatever they call them.
I was going to say.
Remember what they call them.
I remember that. They didn't have black members for a long time because they thought it would only be white people in the 144.
Yeah, because they're all related to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then
there
poor
was
Donnie
some
has
rich
to
black people who wanted to join.
Which is hilarious to me. Anyway. And the odd thing is, too, the Jackson family, they were Jehovah's Witnesses, another group that is mysterious. Or at least back then was very mysterious.
Yeah.
So they asked him about racism. Donnie gets real serious and he says, we aren't racists. And then he says, I'm not an authority on church issues, and I don't know why, but that's what the Lord wants right now. I'm like, oh, that's so cringy. Oh, I felt so bad for him. So let's see. Speaking of marriage, so Marie married Steve when she was 24. Then they divorced 3 years later, and she married another guy and ended up having 2 biological children, 5 adopted kids. Then they got divorced, and now she's married to Steve again because he was a really great guy. It's so, I think it's kind of sweet.
They just weren't ready for each other.
I get the feeling that Marie was more of an independent thinker sometimes than the boys were, maybe. Maybe because she was the only girl. I don't know.
Maybe.
So along those lines, I really like that in one recent-ish interview, Donnie comments on his Vegas show because he did a show in Vegas with Marie for years, like one of those residencies.
Right.
And then they stopped it. So in the Vegas show, Donnie says, I have to be careful because religion is a personal thing and I don't want to be a religious zealot. He said, I'm an entertainer. And when people come to my show, that's what they get. Entertainment. I'm not a preacher. And I was like, I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. He does have a place on his website for people to ask him questions about his faith. Because obviously it's a big part of his life. And he answers them.
Maybe maybe Christians could do that, mainstream ones. Don't talk about it. And then just put it on a website. And people will come if they want to ask.
Yeah.
Believe
faith. What you believe. Yeah. Let's see. So here's something that's a little fun and tipping toward the scandals that we like to mock. Marie, from 2013 to 2016, was the spokesman for Wise Foods, a maker of emergency freeze-dried foods. And they have them in bucket sizes. And they have one called the Extreme Patriot Bundle. You can buy it now if you want to.
Yep. Didn't she do like a diet thing, like Nutrisystem? It wasn't that?
But she's done a lot of spokespersons. And didn't she do dolls? Don't you have one of those?
Let's shut it down right now. Because I was so excited when my dad found this box and it was like, it's a doll. And I'm like, oh, what if it's one of those expensive ones? And it was a frickin' Marie Osmond doll from QVC. I'm like, I don't even remember. Because she was on QVC all the time. Yeah. I remember that.
Well, one of the reasons why they do so many varied things, too, is because the family performed and they took all the money that they had and just put it into one giant pile of family money that would eventually be divvied up accordingly. So they hired people.
So Jimmy gets all this money?
Yeah.
For
and
being
like Donnie
Jimmy?
said that, yes. So Donnie said that he got $25,000 an episode for the Donnie and Marie show, a lot back then. And he never saw any of it because it all went into the pile. And then the pile was used to make real estate investments. Some of those were bad. Some of the people who they hired and trusted were not to be trusted. So they lost almost all of their $80 million fortune.
Holy shit.
At some point in all this. And so then they had to reinvent themselves. And so, you know, Marie was this spokesperson, that spokesperson. She did Dancing with the Stars. These are only the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. All of those residencies in Vegas, those pay very well.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know
and
why
Donnie
you have
did,
to...
Donnie did Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, remember?
Yeah.
He did the revival of that.
He did. And when he got married, it was like, boom, his career was in the toilet because he wasn't an eligible bachelor
not, quote,
anymore.
Eligible. Yeah.
Right.
We didn't become Mormons quick enough.
Right. So he was like, well, I'll just do something else because he had always done that when he was a kid. He's like, barbershop quartet? No, we'll do pop. Oh, no, I'll do bubblegum. Oh, I'll do, a show with Marie. So he decided, I'm going to go conquer Broadway. So they perform and rehearse and they get everything done. And the first night they got horrible reviews and it was shut down the first night. And he was like, what? And
Yikes.
So he said he never read the reviews, but people were saying it was specifically him that they did not care for.
Wow.
So when somebody wanted him to be in the revival of Joseph, he was like, okay, all these years later, now you want me to be in this, but Broadway is where I completely tanked. So, they're a very resilient bunch.
And then he did well, yeah. So let me tell you sort of my thing with it. So I see them on TikTok. I don't know how old they are now, in their 60s. They're very well preserved. I can't. They're
not.
very well preserved.
Donnie is kind of well preserved. Marie is very much had surgery. Yeah.
That's what I mean. She's had enough that it's distorted memories of what she looked like. He looks mostly the same. But I have this thing. So I love Duran Duran. And I used to talk about him all the time. And when they started touring again, people were like, are you going to go to Duran Duran? And I'm like, no. Like, I don't want to see them the way they are now. And that sounds terribly ageist, but I didn't like them at 60. Like, I like them at this certain time, and I like my memories of it. And I have a hard time with seeing Donnie and Marie now because it's just a little too cool for me. I have a little coolness issue with it, and then it makes me wonder if I'm that way. And that is my big issue. Like, do I think I'm much younger and do the white man underbite and dance when I'm going to be, whenever I turn 60? Like, I don't want to be that. So I do get a little cringed out. I'm sure they're great people. People love to go to their concerts. They're still doing their thing. But for me, I have a hard time seeing people who were known as something when they're younger and trying to revive it again later. It just bothers. It icks me.
And it's certain ones too. No, but it's certain performers too, because if you had a big crush on Simon Le Bon from Duran Duran back then, it reminds you of how you felt being a teenager and like all revved up to see, the band that you love and to catch them on video. And it's just, this is like seeing another band.
And
it's like seeing a cover band
tight
of them.
Pants on a 20-year-old is so different than tight white pants on a 60-year-old. And again, I'm sounding ageist, but that's why in the Righteous Gemstones, when Danny McBride, who's, 45 or whatever, wears them, he knows exactly what he's doing because they look ridiculous. And I love that. I love that he's like, I know, that's why I'm wearing these. But there is just something that makes me feel secondhand embarrassment that they're trying to hold on to youth so much that no one is telling them it's okay. Like, it's okay to age.
And at the same time, if they're still able to fill seats and make money, I go, have at it.
Yeah.
Do it.
Totally.
It just doesn't happen to be my cup of tea for them. You know? I'm still hell bent on seeing Eric Clapton because, there's the guitar part of his
he didn't
abilities.
Have like a look and a dance. He didn't dance and look a certain way. And he did not. He's not like, I'm going to do that again. It's like, we don't want to see Britney Spears when she's 70 with a crop top. There's just let your body and yourself mature and age. And so I have a little bit of that with the Osmonds. I'm not too fond of it, but I used to be. so enamored of Marie Osmond because she did a special. And you couldn't record these things. You had to watch it that night. So I waited and waited, had the TV guide with a little dog ear on it because that's how you found stuff. She was going to be in The Gift of the Magi. And it was like a 3-night thing or something. She was so beautiful. Nights. And what they did is they shot it. What else was I doing? So it was fine. But they shot it in that sort of...
it was a short story, Karen.
They had it shot in like that milky film that makes her look ethereal. Yeah. And she had her hair up and like one of those white high neck dresses of the 80s, like holding a flower. And yeah, The Gift of the Magi. And I don't remember who played the guy. But the whole thing is that, you know, her long, beautiful hair, she cuts it to sell for a wig, to buy a watch.
Right.
Band for the guy she loves who sells his watch to get her a stupid hair comb.
Combs.
And
Combs.
Just a comb. I know.
Combs.
But I love that. And she sang a song. I would lip sync the hell out of it. I would put a towel on my head like I had long hair because I used to do that with Cher too. I don't know. Right. And it would play on the radio every once in a while, but we must have bought like the small album because you could buy a regular vinyl, people, but you could buy 2 songs on a small one.
Oh,
so
that's
you're
a 45.
just buying that song and whatever the sucky one was on the other side. Yeah.
The B-side. I can't believe you're not even using the lingo that we all talk about so much.
Well, I'm trying to help the youngins with all this.
The young ones. I know. Well,
but Marie Osmond, like, she was beautiful.
Yeah, and she really looked funky when it was like the early 70s and she had no bangs. And because she had really great, awesome, thick, long hair and it stayed nice and flat. Anyway.
Yeah, and their teeth, man.
Yeah.
That was like the joke, too, was all about their teeth.
Yeah. So one other one that I'll tell you, a little thing about them that's a bit cringy. So in the Mormon belief, they have a thing called temple garments. And there's a version for men and for ladies. And the men have like, I guess maybe down to around their knees. It's white underwear and then an undershirt. And then there's a little symbol on it to represent something to do with the faith. And then there's something to represent like eternity. I don't know. It's like a V and an L or something like that. It's not Louis Vuitton though. So Joy Behar on one of her fucking talk shows gets the idea that she's going to ask them about the underwear. And she calls it magic underwear, which I think is just, you know what? You and I can say that when we're shitting on people, not in a public venue, but she's on TV.
I agree. Not putting someone on the spot. Yeah.
Yeah, but she says, explain the magic underwear to me, because that I don't know about. And Donnie says, you know, I'd rather not. And I have to give him credit. He turned the tables on Barbara Walters at one point, and he gives it back to Joy. And he goes, I'd rather not. I'll tell you why. Yes, we wear. Yes, I am. And I'd rather not get into it because it's not secret. It's just so sacred. And then Joy keeps pushing it, noting that non-Mormons generally laugh at the idea of magic underwear. And they both laughed, and they were like, well, people laugh because they don't understand. And then Donnie tried to help people understand and said, if you could go through the temple, the ceremony there, it goes back to the same ceremony in Solomon's day, all those sacred temples back then. Not everybody was allowed in there, but the promises we make to God, you know, this magical underwear or whatever you want to call it, all it is, it's an outward expression of an inward commitment. And so then she keeps going, but why underwear? Why not a shirt or a ring or socks? And he says, you know what's interesting? Way back in the days, the Jerusalem days, the Old Testament days, they used to wear these things on their foreheads, to remind them, or something on their hand or arm or something like that. And he's like, it's the same thing. It's just a reminder of the promises. And I was looking it up, and even Mormons seem to be divided over like when you're supposed to wear your temple garments. Some say you're supposed to wear them all the time. But on xmormon.com, somebody wrote in about this and said, I'm such a douche. In winter 1992 in Green Bay, Wisconsin, Marie and the Oak Ridge Boys came to town. The local arena was packed. Somehow, by the grace of Joseph Smith, somebody in the ward called to ask us mishies if we wanted to go. Again, by the grace of Brigham Young, we got backstage passes. Even now, I don't know how it all happened. Truly a blessing. So we got to hang out in a tour trailer with Marie. I got my picture taken with her. Then I asked her how she dealt with not wearing garments. She said, not when I perform. Oh my fucking God. I asked a female celebrity as a Mishi about her panties. I'm so embarrassed. My mom still has the pic if you don't believe me. But it's just great. No, not when I'm performing. Done. Next.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. So, I didn't know they wore them like all the time. I got to look
some
this
people,
up.
I suppose, it's like you were saying, they're the different versions.
Do a lot of washing. Yeah.
A lot of washing.
I guess so.
But I was looking at them performing, and like when they would bend over to say hi to the girls and shake their hands, and their jumpsuits, which were white, would be real tight on their butts. They weren't wearing Mormon temple garments. So, but they were in costume.
Bonnie, for that research. Yeah.
Well,
that was good research. Well, I
see a lot when I research.
I looked up the Marie Osmond show that I loved. Let's see if this is familiar to you. It was called The Gift of Love.
Let me throw this in here in the no soup for you category. She and her husband aren't leaving the kids a fortune either, because she wants them to have the motivation to work. And she says none of the money she's made over her lifetime will be left to her children. She said it would be a great disservice to them and that they need to make their own money. She says, congratulations, kids. My husband and I decided you do a great disservice to your children to just hand them a fortune because you take away the one most important gift you can give your children, and that's the ability to work. They won't be rich kids with rich kid syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's fascinating because we just heard about how they dealt with being Mormon and being in, quote, Hollywood and doing all that. But I'm interested in what the Mormon church was thinking. Like, here's our guys. This is what is going to put us on in every household. We're going to be planting seeds of faith. I'm wondering if they were approached by different people in the Mormon church. You guys need to do this or hand out these pamphlets or whatever, and how they dealt with that.
And we're probably not going to find out. But I will tell you, in the documentary that is kind of recent, where the brothers are performing in Branson, Missouri, Merrill, who did a lot of the lead singing on the songs, you'd recognize his voice because it's kind of Donnie-esque, but not Donnie.
Gotcha.
Merrill mentioned that, and this is also sad, he had bulimia because they would tease him so much because he was chubby. So he, as a guy, had bulimia. And at one point he was thinking it'd be really easy to not be here anymore and kill himself. But then he felt a sign from God and didn't. And he's really touched by the fact that there were people who said that they converted because of one of the brothers' stories. So they show that in the documentary.
Right.
Let's see.
The other thing that I remembered when I was watching some TikToks with Marie Osmond is, don't get too much filler. No, is the, what was it called? The Children's Miracle Network.
That was huge.
She helped start.
With John
and it's
Schneider.
Still going.
Yeah.
With John Schneider, who always visits and I think has a house sort of down the way from in this other area where people live. And he has been doing terrible Christian movies, right-wing movies. I'll send you a clip. We should do something on it because it's terrible. Anyway, but yeah, they started the Children's Miracle Network, and it gives a lot of money to especially sick kids in need. And I think that's great.
And hospitals, billions. They quoted some number on there.
Billions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that I respect for sure.
Yeah, and I think I was telling you this before we started the podcast that first of all these kids, I don't know about the first one that of the 9, but at least 8 of them are still alive, which is quite a nice ratio. That's a great percentage.
That's that clean living.
It is. Alan has MS. Alan's son has MS. Wayne had a brain tumor. And then he had something else that I can't remember. And then he lost his hearing. But they're all alive, with the exception of Marie and Jay. They're all married to the same person. So there is something to be said for just avoiding things that you can be addicted to.
Yeah,
Smoking,
I guess
drinking,
so. Or
sexing.
is it the magic garments? Is it the magic garment? No. I saw a video, Johnny Osmond's kids, the Osmond genes were freakish. That's the main thing, is you could tell in Osmond, it was their teeth they got the most, and everyone else in Utah had to fight for them. But his son, he always says, looks like Justin Bieber, which I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. But they all are just these clean living, super polished, people. So
their family is their social group because they have so many of them. Anyway, I would suggest to everybody, if you don't know the song Crazy Horses, it will rock your world. Okay, guys, so there's our rundown, a nice broad history of the Osmond family. And more than you wanted to know about their rock history, because it's interesting to me. But their Mormon background, I don't think it was a big bad thing. I certainly don't think it's as disruptive and distracting as Justin Bieber or Kanye.
Well, true. And it was just the first Mormons anyone had ever heard of. They hadn't even heard of Mormonosity at that point. So,
they got 7 of them.
It could have been worse. Have a good, whatever you're going to have. And thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time. Don't be shit.
Bye.